Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another Axel 72 video, and in today's video I'm going to be giving my prediction for the Jake Paul versus Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. fight. And so if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like the video if you do indeed like the video, and feel free to join the Patreon. The first custom requested video should be out around about the time in which you're watching this. So if you have any fights in which you want to see a kind of prediction for, or if you just want me to speak about any topic in particular in the boxing or combat sporting world at the moment, it's £5 a month. I really appreciate it. And yeah, let's get straight into this one though. So, Jake Paul, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. It's a fight in which nobody wants to see realistically, but I suppose to an extent it is smart matchmaking for Jake Paul. I mean, is anybody going to spend 25 quid to watch it in the pay-per-view? No, but like I say, I think it is smart matchmaking for Jake Paul. In his kind of perspective and the way that he's trying to sell it, it's a former world champion, a former WBC world champion. Yes, that was down at middleweight, and that was going on, I think it was about 10 years ago now. And you know, he is a son of a legend. And I mean, there's been question marks from mainly Jake Paul of what he's been saying, will his legacy of Cesar Chavez Sr. be affected by Jr. if he goes on to lose? And you know, that won't be the case at all. I mean, Chavez Jr., everybody knows, has been nowhere near the level of Senior, and I mean, just hasn't achieved as much as Senior could in the sport. And I mean, it's a very difficult thing, of course, to be able to follow in the footsteps of your father, who has been, you know, and was one of the greatest combat sporting fighters ever. It's, you know, almost impossible to be able to follow in your footsteps like that. I mean, what Chavez Senior has achieved is still a really great achievement, of course, being a former world champion. But yeah, his legacy of his father won't change no matter what the result of this is. And I mean, more so for why Jake Paul would fight Cesar Chavez Jr., it's somebody who went the distance with Canelo in 2017. Yes, that was in 2017, and that was, what, 8 years ago now, but it's somebody who has fought Canelo, and I suppose that's a bit of a stepping stone towards him actually getting a Canelo fight. I mean, there was seemingly it was seemingly close to actually see Jake Paul against Canelo at one point, but I mean, Canelo, luckily for the kind of sake of boxing, decided to choose his excellency and go down the route of fighting Skull and now Crawford, and now he's tied up with Crawford. It seems like we probably won't be seeing a Canelo versus Jake Paul fight anytime soon, because I mean, even though his excellency isn't seemingly controlling Canelo's career, it seems like there'll probably be at least two fights with Canelo and Crawford. So Jake Paul isn't going to be getting that fight with Canelo, most probably anytime soon. So I mean, Chavez Jr., he's under 40. He's coming off 2 wins, and I suppose, you know, that's something in the way of looking at it. And again, you know, that's something in which perhaps is a bit more of a positive. I mean, anything's more of a positive than what we had with Mike Tyson, who was, you know, so old realistically and just shouldn't have been in the ring. But the truth about it all is, Cesar Chavez Jr. hasn't achieved anything since he lost to Canelo, and he lost really badly to Canelo. Yes, he went to decision, but it was just such a beatdown by Canelo. And I think the only reason in which Canelo wasn't able to realistically stop Cesar Chavez Jr. was because Chavez Jr. was just bigger, and inevitably he was just able to take a lot of punishment and just be able to deal with it. And he was catching a lot of shots, but it was still a beatdown. And I mean, the commentators were saying that the judges saw it was a completely one-sided fight in Canelo's favour. And again, like I say, since then he's not done anything in his career, Chavez Jr., that's realistically been that positive. And you've got to look at it as though he has lost to already somebody who Jake Paul has beat. And you look at Jake Paul's resume, and there really isn't that many names in which he could have fought, and it's Anderson Silva. And of course, Jake beat Anderson Silva quite convincingly, including getting a knockdown on him. And Anderson Silva beat Chavez Jr. by split decision. Again, you know, maybe styles make fights or something like that. You can maybe possibly have that as an argument, but it is interesting to see that Jake Paul isn't even bringing that up as a kind of topic the fact that Anderson Silva actually beat Chavez Jr. And, he's just kind of brushing aside and focusing on the fact that Chavez Jr. went all the rounds with Canelo all them years ago. So yeah, that's kind of the truth about it. And you kind of would have to say that Chavez Jr. is only in this for the money. I mean, there's no real surprise, and you see it with a lot of Mexican fighters when they kind of achieve the heights of their career. You can see that they want to have a lot of fights for money, and they enjoy the money side of things. And so, you can tell that he is just doing this for the money. But of course, it is tough to get Jake Paul an opponent who realistically is a big enough name for people to care, but also can be classed as somewhat of a step up, because, I suppose he could have had anybody as a step up from Mike Tyson, but who would have been a big enough name for people to care? And realistically, like I say, charging 25 quid for this, nobody's gonna realistically want to buy a pay-per-view on DAZN when they just watched Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson at the end of last year for free on Netflix. And it is interesting to see that Netflix are not behind this card. I mean, it's on DAZN. Does that mean that perhaps Netflix don't see it as a big enough fight to get involved in, or maybe it's due to Golden Boy's kind of inclusion in the card with the amount of fights in which they have on it, and maybe that means that they are forced to have it on DAZN because Golden Boy's included. I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, it's just interesting to see, and it probably won't sell that well. I mean, that's why they've tried to make the undercard kind of appeal to the actual boxing fans, because they know that the boxing fans on DAZN will want to tune into your Zurdo Ramirez fighting, your Floyd Schofields, your Tevin Farmers. I think that's a really good matchup. The people like that fighting, people might be more likely to tune in for that. But again, would you spend £25 on it? I'm not entirely sure. And, I mean, I suppose at least now world champions are giving the recognition to Jake Paul. When he was first originally calling out the likes of Canelo, it was a long time ago, realistically, a good few years ago now, and he was just delusional, and nobody saw any kind of chance of it happening. And now, of course, we almost saw Canelo as an option at one point, but realistically, it actually wouldn't surprise me if in a few fights he could somehow get his way onto fighting for a world title. I mean, Badou Jack fought on the Fury versus Paul undercard like 2 years ago now, and Badou Jack is an aged world champion who isn't fighting at the height of his career anymore. He came up close in a close fight against Noel Mikhailian, and he's not the best of names, so perhaps Badou Jack might be more willing for a payday than a rematch with Mikhailian. Or, even Zurdo Ramirez, who, like I say, is on this card, he realistically probably would be willing to give Jake Paul an option. And I think he said that as well, due to the fact of the money being involved in everything like that. So I think realistically, if Jake Paul wins maybe a few more fights and he keeps getting match made in these kind of positions in which the fights are still in his favour, then he could definitely probably get himself in line for a world title shot. Do I want to see that? No. Do I think that is good for boxing? No. I mean, I think Zurdo Ramirez has to go on to fight Jai Opetaia after his fight if he wins, and then Badou Jack should give Mikhailian a rematch, if not fight Riziki, then, Jake Paul shouldn't realistically be included. But if you look at, especially for Badou Jack's case, fighting a Riziki or a Mikhailian just isn't going to get that much money. So it wouldn't surprise me if perhaps all of a sudden we see Badou Jack versus Jake Paul. And I mean, Jake Paul was keen to talk about the fact that us as boxing fans are more willing to give time to and to watch fights like the Skull versus Canelo fight, which was just a really boring fight and a poor showing. But I mean, if you look at his fight versus Tyson, yes, I suppose to an extent you got to respect Jake for not going and trying to fully just brutalise and knock out Mike Tyson. But yes, the build-up was really good, but the fight was awful. And so, boxing fans are going to be more willing to watch a fight between Canelo and Skull, where at least Canelo is trying to come forwards and trying to make the fight happen and actually wants to try and knock out his opponents, instead of watching a Jake Paul fight an old Mike Tyson who, he's just trying to not knock him out, just trying to occasionally land an alright shot and just not really doing too much. It's a weird thing, and so I don't think that argument from Jake Paul really kind of stands up to anything, because like I say, his last fight versus Mike Tyson was just such a poor viewing, to be completely honest. And I mean, to speak about Jake Paul as a fighter, I think he utilizes his jab all right, and he's strong-handed. You got to give him that. He has got a decent level of power in him. I mean, often a lot of people are kind of just saying that he's kind of paying fighters to fall down and things like that. I don't know if that's the case or not. I think it is just the level of opposition is still quite poor. So, he's strong-handed. I mean, he wasn't able to drop Mike Tyson, but yes, like I say before, he wasn't realistically trying to. So it'd be interesting to see. At least he's going to be trying to get out Cesar Chavez Jr. if he can do that or not. He is typically quite good at timing his right hand and walking you onto shots, and perhaps he might be able to do that with Chavez Jr. I'm not entirely sure. He doesn't realistically stay on the ropes too long, which is a good thing. I think that's where Chavez Jr. does his best work. He changes levels all right. It's a very basic kind of set of shots in which he does throw when he's changing levels, but yeah, like I say, it does it all right, and he is gaining a bit more of a varied output. I mean, when he was first knocking out guys like your Tyron Woodleys and your Nate Robinsons, he was just throwing that right hand over and over again and really loading up on it, and it was getting predictable, but he is getting a bit more varied with it. I mean, you saw him knock out that Borland, or no, that Andre August with an uppercut, and like I said, there's a little bit more variety in his work now. I think negatives wise, I mean, he's messy and close, and he does try and force the stoppage a bit, and he has quite poor accuracy in close where he is showcasing minimal head movement. He's just basically there to be hit, to be completely honest, and he is, crossing his feet over and standing square in front of you as quite a big target. I still don't think his chin's been tested overly. Do I think that Chavez Jr. has the power to realistically test his chin? Not really, but again, I think it's just smart matchmaking again. I think the hardest person that probably has hit him was that one punch in the first round or second round that Mike Tyson landed on him. And you could tell that Jake Paul didn't really like it, to be honest. But again, like I said, I just don't really think he's fought anybody who is, realistically known for having too much power. He leaves himself open. He has a low guard. He can get caught with big overhands. He's there to be caught with counters. I think he admires his work too much, and I don't think when he's throwing combinations he looks the best, to be completely honest. Chavez Jr. as a fighter, I'm more so going on at the moment, and to be fair, even if you go and look at that Canelo performance, you can't really say too much good positive wise from him, other than the fact he was having a high guard and was able to survive, and that's realistically about it, to be completely honest. But I mean, like I say, he's got a high guard, he's willing to throw at times, and if you allow him to come forwards, he will try and throw a bit, and he digs to the body well in combinations. I think his body work definitely is his best attribute, and that might be able to be something that can slow up Jake Paul if he goes into the back foot. But again, I just think he's so slow and so flat-footed, Chavez Jr., that kind of Jake Paul might be able to just circle around him quite easily. He wants to be somewhat out of range, or a bit too far out of range, and when he was fighting Anderson Silva, it was weird because Silva was trying to beck him in and trying to get him to come in, and Chavez Jr. was just kind of throwing a jab, then just staying out, throwing a jab, staying out. If he'd have really worked his angles, found his openings, he really could have caused some damage on Silva, and that's what would have won him the fight, and that would have been all Silva's fault. But instead he was just awkwardly jittering, trying to land a jab to the body, not really landing anything of real significance, and just making Silva look like he's the better, kind of smarter fighter out of the two, the better, smarter boxer out of the two. And it just was weird to see. He's relatively composed on the ropes, Chavez Jr., and you got to say he does have a solid chin. I think his chin is still somewhat there to an extent, so it will be interesting to see if Jake Paul, like I say, can knock him out, if he has that power to knock him out, but I'm not entirely sure if he does. Negatives about Chavez Jr. is his physicality has kind of faded. He looks quite a weak fighter at the moment, and I think he hasn't come up to this weight division that well. I think he is quite small for the weight. When he was fighting at middleweight, he was a big guy for the weight, and that's where he was having a lot of his success. But now I think he's quite a small guy for cruiserweight, or light heavyweight, whatever weight this is at. And so I think realistically, he is quite vulnerable to just kind of being moved about and hit about with shots. He doesn't kind of make the most of good positions. He leaves his punches out. He is not the best at slowing you down or cutting off the ring. His accuracy is quite poor. He reacts to most feints and can be moved back quite easily. He has quite an open guard as well, and I think he wilts away during contests quite significantly. So who do I think is going to win? I think that Jake Paul is going to be able to win via unanimous decision. I think it's going to be quite a boring fight. I think it's going to be quite an easy one where Jake Paul can just for the most part do what he wants. I think maybe Cesar Chavez Jr. might be a bit defensive, and that's what might showcase a little bit of a different side from Jake Paul. But again, I don't think it's going to be an entertaining contest. It could just be a very boring fight where Jake Paul's just trying to load up on a lot of shots and Chavez Jr. was just kind of trying to stay out of range a bit too much, and then Jake Paul occasionally lands one on the gloves or something like that. So again, I wouldn't expect anything too crazy of a fight for this one, but again, I think Jake Paul's going to do enough to be able to win via unanimous decision. Then who he can go on to fight next, God knows, to be completely honest. I'm not going to be able to list who he could go on to fight next. But to now go on to speak about the kind of bigger fights, in my opinion, which is on this card, the more significant fights as a boxing fan on this card. So we'll start off with Zurdo Ramirez versus Yuniel Dorticos for the WBA and WBO Cruiserweight World titles. This is a defense of the belts, of course, from Zurdo Ramirez. He's coming fresh off his win against Billum Smith, and that was a decent performance, a decent defending of his belts. And I mean, Zurdo Ramirez has been somebody who has had a great run in his career. He has kind of gone through the weight divisions really well, and I think better than a lot of fighters can. I mean, he started at quite a low weight division, but now he's made it up to cruiserweight, similarly to an extent as Chavez Jr., but Zurdo Ramirez has just been able to get better, and even though he's not carrying seemingly the same amount of power in which he was in the light heavyweight division, where he was able to knock out a lot of his opponents, he's moving really well still, and he's circling really well, and I think that's what makes him and Opetaia just so much better than all the other cruiserweights in the division. They just move so much better. I mean, Ramirez pivots around you really well, and he's quite smooth with his movements, whereas Opetaia is explosive and he's fast and he's got quite bouncy feet, and he can get in range really quickly. So that's what I think makes him just a step ahead of everybody else. I mean, Dorticos is somebody who has fought at a really high level himself. I mean, he's gotten a few good wins on his resume, and he's definitely got a real powerful shot. He fought in the World Boxing Super Series back in 2019. He was a runner-up. He beat Tabiti, and before that he beat Masternak on two really good performances there. And Tabiti, that one was quite a brutal knockout, but like I say, that was back in 2018, 2019. Then he fought Briedis and lost in a close fight. It wasn't, maybe Briedis should have maybe won by unanimous decision in my opinion. It was a bit more of a kind of one-way type of fight than what perhaps the judges scored it, but still Dorticos is a powerful threat. Yes, he is 39 years of age though, and yes, he has slowed down significantly over the 6 years since then, and he hasn't realistically been able to do too much since then. I mean, he's coming off a few fights in which he's had, I believe, knockout wins. I think he's had 3 knockout wins in a row going from memory, and so that's kind of what's got himself back in this position to be in line for a world title shot. But realistically, that Tabiti win and that Masternak win were the only ones that are the good names in his career. The ones that he's gotten post Briedis have been real kind of poor names in which they're just kind of journeyman type opponents to an extent to just get himself into a well ranked position. It's so weird in the cruiserweight division. You can get yourself in a well ranked position even when you don't realistically deserve it, because I feel like if you lose against a high level guy, you have to kind of work back to being able to get to a good level again. You can't just fight nobodies and then all of a sudden get into a big opportunity. I don't know if that's just me, but now of course Zurdo's fighting him instead of fighting Opetaia because it's a mandatory, so I suppose that makes sense. And I mean, we see it so much in boxing. I would much prefer it to not be the case, but of course that would kind of be changing boxing too much, I suppose. But I mean, what Zurdo Ramirez is doing, like I say, he is kind of one of the only Mexican fighters who are really able to fight in these higher weight divisions and have so much success. I mean, there's him, there was Andy Ruiz at one point, but there really hasn't been that many Mexican higher weight fighters who have been able to have this much success as Zurdo Ramirez, and so he is kind of breaking records to that extent. And so who do I think is going to win? I think Zurdo is going to be able to win via TKO in round 11. I think he is going to be the better mover again. I think he's going to be able to land clean and more significantly. Yes, he's going to have to be aware of the few shots from Dorticos, but I think Dorticos is just too slow and he's going to get outmaneuvered, outclassed, outpunched, and inevitably I think Ramirez will stop him, like I say, really late on, where I think he's just going to take too much punishment, Dorticos, and with the age in which he's at, I don't think anybody's going to want to see him carry on. So again, like I say, I think Ramirez will end up getting that late stoppage, and I think that first stoppage since moving up into the cruiserweight division, which is really nice to see. And then, of course, I mean, he has to fight Opetaia next. I think it's the only fight that makes sense, and I think if that doesn't happen, then I think His Excellency really should get on to him and really try and, force the fight to happen. And if not, maybe have some sort of repercussions if he doesn't go on to fight Opetaia. That will probably be the best way to do it, because otherwise Opetaia is just wasting his career waiting around for a Zurdo Ramirez, and then Opetaia, if that doesn't happen next, has to just go on to the heavyweight division, because like I say, he's just wasting his career with these names like a Skeo around in the cruiserweight division at the moment. But to move on to the Tevin Farmer versus Floyd Schofield fight, which, like I say, I think is the best matchup on this card in my opinion. Floyd Schofield is somebody who, of course, was meant to fight Shakur Stevenson, and he kind of came ill just right at the very kind of last second, and it meant that Josh Padley had to jump in instead. And now Josh Padley, of course, has gone on to have a good career, well, have a contract with Matchroom, and so he's got good things probably lined up. But how has the kind of illness affected Schofield is interesting, will be interesting to see, because like I say, it was quite sudden. We didn't really hear too much about what actually happened, but it was just quite a sudden illness. And so, now he's back, and he's back in a step down of opponents. But, like I say, Tevin Farmer I think is a really good matchup. I mean, of course, Tevin Farmer is coming off the back-to-back defeats against Muratalla and Zepeda twice, but them Zepeda fights, he showed so much heart, so much grit, that he so much skill to an extent as well, and really kind of deserved of another top opportunity. I mean, a lot of people were thinking that Farmer was out when he was, just before his Muratalla fight. When Muratalla fought Farmer, a lot of people weren't really thinking too much of it, and Muratalla did beat Farmer better than that of Zepeda, but still, Farmer is a live opponent, and I mean, he fought 3 months ago, and I mean, he's being rewarded by Golden Boy. He's an active fighter now, and he's gonna be coming in with probably quite a bit of confidence about him. And it will be interesting to see how this hand injury, in which Farmer seemingly had in the Zepeda rematch, if that's going to come up again as a problem, because it was clearly quite a significant problem. I don't know if it was the hand or if it was kind of the bicep or something like that. He had some kind of significant problem with his hand, which meant that he almost got stopped in the 4th or 5th round against Zepeda in their rematch. But Farmer, I mean, I don't know if that's healed like drastically, or if it wasn't really that bad, or if it was just a sudden kind of pain or something like that. But I mean, during the fight, he managed to battle through it, so maybe that's what he's just trying to do here, which is, I don't know if that's something I'd recommend. But like I say, he showed incredible amounts of heart, perhaps even could have been given a knockdown scored his way in the final round of that Zepeda fight, which, I mean, I don't think would have been enough to be able to sway the judges any other way, but maybe might have made it a split decision. But like I say, that would have been 2 knockdowns in 2 fights against William Zepeda. I think Floyd Schofield can be a similar fighter, but again, I don't know if he is. He could be a little bit more. He could be a little bit more skilled than that of Zepeda at times. I mean, I think Zepeda is offensively a better fighter, and I think he distributes his work better, and he punches better, and he has a better output. But I think Floyd Schofield can be a really good aggressive fighter, but he lunges in a bit, he can be a bit messy with his footwork, and he can get caught. When Floyd Schofield last fought against Giron, he was fighting for the majority of the fight really well on the back foot, and was happy to just land a few shots and really just was outboxing Giron. And yes, it wasn't the most entertaining of performances that first kind of 10 rounds, but it was dominating, and it was doing exactly what you had to do against a tough Mexican. But then in the 11th round and the 12th round, he got dropped in the 11th, I believe, and then he just carried on trying to go to war with Giron, and that's when things look rocky and shaky. And if he tries to do that with Farmer, Farmer knows how to be in a war, and he knows how to battle against that. So Farmer is probably going to be able to time Schofield onto shots. He's got a really nice uppercut, Farmer, that he does time shots onto. So, if he's going to be doing that, Schofield, then he might be in with a risky night. But if he boxes like he can box, then I think he could, have a better night than that of Zepeda just by outboxing him. I think that Floyd Schofield's going to be able to win via unanimous decision. I would love to see him, like I say, just again put on a boring display, but just outbox him and just continually use his speed and his really nice jab. It is a really nice sharp jab, and just utilize that movement. Farmer, when he's coming forwards, isn't really that good of a fighter. He is that more so wanting to be on the back foot and try and respond in time you coming in. So if Floyd doesn't give him that openings and leaves being disciplined, then I would, believe that Floyd Schofield can win via unanimous decision. Then who he can go on to fight next? I mean, of course, Shakur is fighting Zepeda now. I don't know if there's a rematch clause included with that. There might be. I mean, it was perhaps rumoured the fact that, he kind of was ducking the fights versus Shakur and he wasn't actually ill, even though we saw some photos. Again, it was a weird circumstance. Maybe he didn't want the Shakur fight in the first place. He's definitely missed his opportunity now, and everybody prefers to see Stevenson versus Zepeda than Stevenson versus Schofield, even though it's still quite a good fight. So he might have to move away from that for the moment. So who he could go on to fight? I mean, a Lucas Bardi fight would be a great fight. Of course, Bardi is somebody who I've had the pleasure of speaking to, and he's somebody who is with Most Valuable Promotion, so that could be a great fight to happen. Two top contenders against each other. Or, Mason and Notes are being rumoured for a WBO world title fight due to the fact of Davis being forced to, vacate his title because of how bad he missed weight. So that the winner of that could face Schofield, and that could be a great fight for a world title as well. But yeah, that's it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you did. Like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.